Joe Frazier fought with fire, crushing giants and leaving his mark on boxing forever. They called him unbeatable. But his hardest battles didn't end in the ring. They lived on in grudges, betrayals, and scars that time never healed. At 80, Frazier revealed the boxers he hated most. They weren't just rivals. They were enemies who cut deeper than any punch ever could. The journey of a champion in his era. Joe Frazier wasn't the kind of heavyweight you could overlook. The moment he stepped into the ring, you felt the storm coming. Shorter than most of the giants he faced, but built like steel, with a left hook that could break bones, he was the definition of relentless. He didn't fight just to score points or look good. He went straight at his opponent, giving his all to win every punch. He came forward, pressing, pounding, until the other man had nothing left to give. They called him Smokin' Joe, and once you saw him fight, you knew why. But the man who became a world champion started in a place where champions weren't supposed to come from. Joe was born on January 12, 1944, in a small town called Beaufort, South Carolina, to a family of sharecroppers. They worked on someone else's farm and only got to keep a little bit of what they grew. The land they worked on was so poor that people called it white dirt. It was dry, rough soil that could hardly grow anything except cotton and a few watermelons. His parents toiled with 2 mules, Buck and Jenny, just to keep food on the table. Life was tough for young Joe. He wore old clothes with patches and shoes with holes, and many nights his family worried if there would be enough food to eat. Poverty wasn't something he could escape. It was everywhere around him. But deep inside, that tough beginning lit a fire in him. The same fire that would one day make him a champion. By the time he was a teenager, school was gone, childhood was gone, and the fight for survival had already begun. He left home, went to New York, and tried to find work. Jobs were scarce, and for a time he wandered around without direction, even resorting to stealing cars and selling them to survive. But deep down, Joe had bigger dreams. He wanted to fight, to carve his name into the sport the way his hero, Joe Louis, once had. Still searching for a chance to turn those dreams into reality, Joe eventually found himself in Philadelphia, where his story truly began. In Philadelphia, Joe Frazier worked in a slaughterhouse. To get stronger, he did something unusual. He practiced by punching big pieces of meat hanging in the cold room. This strange training became part of his story. At the same time, he joined a local boxing gym, where his power and toughness quickly stood out. By 1964, Joe Frazier had been training hard and making a name for himself in local boxing competitions in Philadelphia. He had already shown speed, strength, and determination that set him apart from other young fighters. In the heavyweight final to qualify to represent the United States in the 1964 Olympics, Frazier faced a big challenge: 300-pound Buster Mathis, the only fighter who had ever beaten him as an amateur. Frazier lost the fight on points, so Mathis got the spot for the Tokyo Games. Frazier had to go as a backup. Even though he had lost, he kept training hard, hoping for another opportunity. And that opportunity did come. While training in Tokyo, Mathis broke his knuckle. Frazier was chosen to take his place, giving him a sudden chance to compete on the world stage and prove himself to the world. But there was a problem. In the semifinals, Frazier was the last American boxer left in the tournament, and disaster struck. In the middle of the fight, he felt a sharp pain in his left thumb. My left hook was a heat-sealing missile, careening off his face and body time and again. Twice in the second round, I knocked him to the canvas, but as I pounded away, I felt a jolt of pain shoot through my left arm. "Oh, damn, the thumb," Frazier said. He didn't know how bad the injury really was, but he didn't dare stop. One wrong punch could have ended his dream. So he hid the pain, kept throwing punches, and outlasted his opponent, the tough Soviet boxer Vadim Yemelyanov. At the Olympic Games final, with his thumb still shattered, every punch felt like fire shooting up his arm. But Frazier refused to give in. Even though he had a hurt thumb, he fought hard and won the gold medal, proving to the world just how tough he was. From there, Joe's rise was unstoppable. He tore through the heavyweight ranks. By 1965, he turned professional, and within just a year, he had 11 wins and 0 losses. 3 years later, he was crowned heavyweight champion. What made him so dangerous wasn't just his power, but the way he never stopped coming. He moved side to side, kept pressing forward, and wore his opponents down until he could unleash his thunderous left hook. A punch so fierce it didn't just win fights, it ended careers. He never slowed down, and his stamina was unmatched. Further into his career, Frazier was going to make history again, and this time in a way no one expected. In 1971, history tilted in his favor. He became the first man to beat Muhammad Ali, winning the famous fight of the century by a clear judge's decision. That night, Joe wasn't just a champion. He was the man who stood taller than the biggest name in sports. But his rise wasn't just about that one fight. Years earlier, he had already proven his strength by winning Olympic gold, and not long after, he went on to claim the heavyweight championship. The boxing world kept recognizing his greatness, naming him Fighter of the Year 3 different times. Even decades later, in 1999, the Ring magazine placed him among the greatest heavyweights of all time, proof that Frazier's legacy wasn't just in the fights he won, but in the history he left behind. Even though Joe won medals, titles, and lots of respect, his story wasn't only about winning. He was Muhammad Ali's biggest rival, and they fought in battles that pushed both of them to their limits. Their most famous fight was the Thrilla in Manila, a 14-round war that many people say was the toughest boxing match ever. But even with all the glory, Joe carried a lot of bitterness outside the ring. He never forgave Muhammad Ali for making him look small in front of the world. And he also held anger toward the boxing promoters and media who, in his eyes, treated Ali like the hero and pushed him into the shadows. So who were the people he just couldn't forgive? Muhammad Ali. On March 8, 1971, Madison Square Garden was full of excitement. This wasn't just another boxing match, it was personal. Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier didn't just want to win, they wanted to prove who was truly the best. After years of tough words and rivalry, the world was ready for what people called the fight of the century. On one side stood Joe Frazier, just 27 years old, and at the peak of his career, strong not only in his body, but also in his mind. But Frazier wasn't stepping into the ring alone. Waiting on the other side was a man who had already become a legend. Muhammad Ali, who was 29 years old and had just come back to boxing after being away for 3 years, stood across the ring. The entire world was watching. The stage wasn't just a boxing ring, it was history. From the opening bell, the fight delivered everything it promised. Ali's quick hands stole some of the early rounds, but Frazier never backed down. By the middle rounds, Ali's pace slowed, and Joe's strength and rhythm started to control the fight. Round after round, the momentum shifted. But something surprising happened in the 15th round. A thunderous left hook smashed Ali to the canvas. The crowd exploded. Ali rose, but the damage was done. When the final bell rang, the judges all agreed. Joe Frazier had beaten Muhammad Ali. Ali left the arena with a swollen jaw and a hospital trip ahead of him. Joe left with something far more lasting: his moment. That fight didn't just give Joe the win, it gave him an image he would hold on to for the rest of his life, an image burned into history. The image of Ali lying on the ground and Joe standing over him with both pain and pride on his face stayed on the wall of Joe's gym in Philadelphia for many years. It was the only photo of Ali that Joe ever put up there. For Joe, that photo showed how he wanted people to remember him, not living in Ali's shadow, but winning in that moment. But if their first fight crowned Joe, what followed cut deeper than any punch. The rematches, the second fight in 1974 and the brutal thriller in Manila in 1975, left scars that never healed. The damage wasn't only physical, it lived inside him. Because Ali's attacks didn't end in the ring. Outside it, he waged a war of words. He often made fun of Frazier to get inside his head before fights. He called him names like dumb and ugly. He even went as far as calling him a gorilla and Uncle Tom. Once, Ali told reporters that Frazier didn't look good and even joked that people far away could smell him. In Manila, Ali admitted that his harsh words sometimes risked giving people the wrong idea, not only about Frazier, but about black men in general. For Joe, these weren't just jokes. They were humiliations that cut deep into his identity, his family, and his pride. Joe once told a writer named Thomas Hauser how deeply hurt he felt about Muhammad Ali. He said, "God might not like me talking that way, but it's in my heart." I hated that man. How would you feel if your kids came home from school crying because everyone was calling their daddy a gorilla? 20 years I've been fighting Ali, and I still want to take him apart piece by piece. In another moment of bitter reflection, he added, "I don't like him, but I got to say, in the ring, he was a man. He shook me in Manila. He won, but I sent him home worse than he came. Look at him now. He's damaged goods. I know it. You know it. Everyone knows it. He was always making fun of me. I'm the dummy. I'm the one getting hit in the head. Tell me now, him or me? Which one talks worse now?" For Joe, what hurt the most wasn't just the mean words. It was feeling betrayed. Back when Ali wasn't allowed to fight, Joe helped him. He gave him money, spoke up for him, and even worked to get him back into boxing. But when Ali became a star again, instead of thanking Joe, he went against him. That's why Joe felt the insults cut so deeply. They weren't just trash talk, they felt personal. Frazier admitted that before they had fought, Ali's words hurt him more than the punches. Ali later revealed that he only said those things to sell more tickets, but tickets had nothing to do with it. Frazier did not believe that was his intention, as they were paid $2.5 million each. He believed that Ali called him names and dubbed him as the white man's champion to make people dislike him. In his 1996 autobiography, Smokin' Joe, the autobiography of a heavyweight champion of the world, Frazier spoke even more openly. He said Ali thought those mean words would break him before their fight, but instead of making him weak, they made him stronger. He was wrong, Frazier explained. His words didn't hurt me. They woke me up and showed me the kind of person he really was. As time went on, Joe was still upset. At the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, when Ali was chosen to light the Olympic flame, Joe felt left out. He thought he deserved that honor too. Joe was so angry that he said if he had the chance, he might have pushed Ali toward the fire. Even when fans asked him simple questions, Frazier always spoke honestly. Once, a woman asked if he had ever fought Ali. Frazier said yes, and reminded her that he had beaten him. Then he added something that showed how much the fights had cost. Look at how Ali's health is today, and remember that our battles in the ring played a big part in that. In the book Ghosts of Manila, writer Mark Crom showed how angry Joe still was. Near the end of the century, and Muhammad Ali still swims inside of Joe Frazier like a determined bacillus. At times, his contempt for Ali just lay there hissing. Some said Joe's hatred hurt his own legacy, making him look bitter in comparison to the beloved Ali. But from Frazier's point of view, it wasn't just rivalry. It was betrayal, humiliation, and wounds that never healed. With the bad blood between Ali and Frazier, one can't help but wonder the true extent of damage Ali's words may have had on Frazier, and if Frazier really forgave him. One thing is certain, though. For Joe Frazier, the hatred was real, and it never truly left him. It will, however, seem that Ali was not the only man who made Smokin' Joe's blood boil. George Foreman. On January 22, 1973, the boxing world turned its eyes to Kingston, Jamaica. Inside the National Stadium, Joe Frazier, undefeated with 29 wins and no losses, the man who had beaten Muhammad Ali, walked into the ring to defend his crown against a hungry challenger. This fight was called the Sunshine Showdown. But for Joe Frazier, it would be the start of his darkest nightmare. To most people, Joe Frazier looked untouchable, but standing across the ring was George Foreman, a big young fighter from Texas with scary power and heavy punches. For Frazier, this fight became the beginning of his hardest and most painful nightmare. From the first bell, Foreman attacked with full force. Joe tried to fight his way in, but Foreman's uppercuts sent him to the floor twice. He kept getting up, but by the end of the round, Joe was barely holding on. Round 2 was even worse. Foreman hit Frazier with a big right, then a left hook, and another right, dropping him 3 more times. The referee finally stopped the fight at 1 minute and 35 seconds of the second round. It was over. The unstoppable Joe Frazier had been destroyed in just 2 rounds. George Foreman was now the heavyweight champion of the world and the 3rd youngest ever at that time. At ringside, Frazier's trainer Angelo Dundee begged the referee to stop the fight. Meanwhile, Howard Cosell's famous shout, "Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!" became a part of sports history and has been repeated for years on TV and in videos. Foreman himself later admitted that he even felt overwhelmed by the stage that night. Looking back years later, he said, "I felt like the underdog. You see this famous fighter coming at you, and you wonder, am I really here? It feels like a dream. The bell rings. He hits you, and you have to hit back. That's when you realize, man for man, we're all the same. But it takes a moment to understand because you're looking at a legend." When people asked Joe about Foreman's punches, he was honest. No, he didn't change the way he fought. He just came out and went to work. He was a big, strong guy. And one thing I can tell you, he really hit hard. For Foreman, it was the signature victory of his young career. For Frazier, it was humiliation on the biggest stage. And perhaps, deep down, that humiliation never left him. Frazier may not have hated Foreman the way he hated Ali, but Big George represented something worse: the end of Joe's aura of invincibility. He wasn't just beaten, he was dominated, overshadowed, and replaced by a new era of heavyweight power. For the first time, the world saw Joe as vulnerable, a reminder that even legends have limits. And that moment opened the door to a painful question. Did Joe quietly resent Foreman's success and the way the world remembered "Down goes Frazier" more than his own victories? Maybe. Because for all of Joe's pride and grit, George Foreman became the man who reminded the world that even Smokin' Joe could burn out. Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes, the Easton assassin, carved his name into heavyweight history, reigning from 1978 to 1985 with 20 consecutive title defenses. He defeated legends like Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, Ernie Shavers, and Leon Spinks. His jab was a weapon, his consistency unmatched. And yet, Holmes's legacy was never just about victories. It was also about his voice. He spoke boldly, sometimes harshly, and never cared if his words cut as deep as his punches. By 1989, the heavyweight crown had already passed to Mike Tyson, and television wanted drama. That year, Bryant Gumbel brought together Holmes, Ali, Joe Frazier, and Ken Norton for an HBO sit-down that turned into more than an interview. The subject was Tyson. When asked if Tyson could compete in their era, Holmes boldly declared, "All of us here could have beaten Mike Tyson." Nobody would even know who he was. Holmes, unconcerned, insisted that they had all done the same, while Frazier added that although they sometimes aimed for the shoulders and legs, and even threw a few low blows themselves, he still recognized that Tyson was precise and accurate with his punches. Their disagreement wasn't just about Tyson, it revealed an underlying tension. Holmes's dismissive tone could have felt like a slight against Frazier's era, subtly undermining the sacrifices and grit that defined Smokin' Joe's generation. The tension, however, did not die on TV. It followed them into the ring and into the next generation. Not long after, Holmes faced Joe Frazier's son, Marvis. What happened that night lasted less than a round, 2 minutes and 57 seconds to be exact. Holmes crushed the inexperienced young fighter, and many people criticized the match. "What a silly mismatch," said Eddie Futch, Marvis's trainer. The fight quickly became a symbol of the ongoing tension between the two boxing families, showing that old rivalries didn't end with one generation. But Joe Frazier never apologized for putting his son in there, and that raised questions. Was it pride? Was it a way to challenge Holmes directly? Maybe even an attempt to humble him? Whatever the reason, the result only deepened the uneasy air between the two men. Because Holmes was always blunt. He dismissed, he spoke without filter, and he didn't care who felt stung. That might have made Frazier feel ignored or disrespected, and maybe even made him quietly hold a grudge. Joe Frazier was proud and didn't forgive being ignored or disrespected easily. With Holmes, that tension stayed, showing that in boxing, respect isn't just earned in the ring, but also in what people say afterward. Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston wasn't just a heavyweight champion, he was a presence. The kind of man who didn't have to say much because his fists already spoke louder than words. With his long reach, crushing jab, and an aura that froze opponents before the first punch was even thrown, Liston became one of the most feared fighters of his era. When he destroyed Floyd Patterson twice in back-to-back first-round knockouts, the world understood. A new king had arrived, and his crown was intimidation. Even after his time passed, the shadow of Liston never left the heavyweight division. And for Joe Frazier, that shadow felt especially close. Both men carried power like thunder. Both fought with a relentlessness that broke opponents down, and both earned reputations as forces of nature in the ring. It was no surprise that fans and writers couldn't resist comparing them. Fans and boxing writers have long speculated about what would have happened if the two legends had ever shared a ring. On Reddit, fans argued back and forth. One person wrote, "I think Liston was the better, more skilled fighter. I'd pick Liston to win on points." Another said, "Both hit super hard, like hammers. It could just come down to who lands the first big punch." Still, I'd go with Liston. He fought with more control in his prime. One user remembered sparring with Liston. He always pushed me back and beat me with his skills. Liston wins this one. Another added, that guy could fight in any style. He could box, he could brawl. He had huge hands, super long arms, and that scary stare. He really was the toughest guy around. For Frazier, however, the constant comparisons may have been a source of quiet frustration. While he respected Liston's talent, it could sting to always be measured against a fighter who never directly clashed with him. Fans' praise and constant talk about Liston might have made it seem like his shadow covered Frazier's own hard work and success. Was it real hate? More likely, it was quiet frustration, with Frazier feeling people didn't fully respect him and kept comparing him to a legend who seemed bigger than life. Joe Frazier wanted to be remembered on his own terms, not as someone standing in the long shadow of Sonny Liston. Joe Frazier had a style built on moving his head, staying low, and pushing forward non-stop. His best weapon was a crushing left hook that knocked out many fighters. He could switch guards, but often used a tight crab style to protect himself. Later in his career, he surprised people by mixing in his right hand when they expected his left. Joe fought with fire, but his hardest battles were in his heart. Some fans say he stayed bitter. Others say he had good reason. Who do you think Joe Frazier hated most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories. Catch you in the next video.